This is the new Mitsubishi Xpander, which gets a refresh for the 2023 model year. But what exactly do you get for this mid-cycle refresh? First and foremost, we have to talk about the car's looks, which receives a number of key updates.
What you're gonna notice with the new Mitsubishi Xpander right off the bat is the new front end, which for this time around, they extended the lower portion of the front bumper. This used to be my awkward angle for the Xpander since it used to have this weird underbite or overbite, which made it look a bit off proportion, but they extended the front bumper, giving it better proportions. And then you're gonna also notice the redesigned dynamic shield grille, which for this time around you have more black plastic sections, which makes it look sportier and much more aggressive compared to the previous model. Also noticeable would be the new T-shaped LED headlights, which look really sharp. And then also yung kanyang LED park lights are now the daytime running lights, which also gives it a more modern appearance compared to the previous model. And then you're also gonna notice the new 17-inch alloy wheels, which compared to the previous model are 16-inch alloy wheels, which gives the Xpander also a much more sleeker appearance compared to the previous model. And it really complements the increased ride height, the increased ground clearance, which is now at 225 millimeters, which gives it a more SUV crossover look compared to the previous model. And that's about it for the front end of the Xpander. And then now moving towards the back end of the Xpander, mapapansin nyo, you have these new LED taillights, which are much more modern in appearance kasi you have more LED elements. You also have this cathode looking piece now, which makes it look really modern, a bit European pa nga sa totoo lang. And the tailgate has also been redesigned. Yeah, you used to have this middle section before, you have a separate panel here, but now it's a cleaner appearance in terms of how the panels are organized. And then also, you're gonna notice the new rear bumper. You have these sort of fake vents, but you also have a reflector, which also gives the Xpander's rear end a more aggressive appearance. You also have these satin silver skid plate looking elements, which again gives it a more SUV crossover appearance compared to the previous Xpander. These are pretty much the changes for the Xpander. There's not much in terms of the side profile. It's more of just the front and rear end of this MPV. And yeah, overall, it actually looks really nice. It looks really sharp. And that's actually pretty much it in terms of the changes for the Xpander's exterior. So as for the interior of the new Mitsubishi Xpander, una nyo mapapansin is that there's more soft touch plastics now. I mean, itong segment na to isn't necessarily known for those plush materials, but yeah, I love the soft touch elements dito sa dashboard niya. Hard plastic pa rin ang upper dash niya, but the middle section is now finished in leatherette, which again gives it a really premium feel compared to its rivals. I think this is the only subcompact MPV or entry-level MPV sa segment na ito with this amount of soft touch plastics, no? And that really helps the Xpander have, you know, a more plush cabin. It gives it a really upmarket feel despite of course being an entry-level MPV, and that's really good. I like it when manufacturers do their best to make their cars don't feel as, you know, like I've only spent this much on a car. Really nice. I love how Mitsubishi has improved the interior of the Xpander. So apart from the upgraded materials dito sa dashboard niya, you also have leatherette dito sa door panels niya and the armrest. Even the center armrest is also made in leatherette, no? In this brown leather, really plush. The seats are in fabric in this particular variant, and the steering wheel feels great. This leather steering wheel, I like the perforations dito. It feels nice, and now you have digital aircon controls to mimic what basically looks like yung automatic climate controls, diba? And you also have a new infotainment system. It's now a Mitsubishi OEM infotainment, hindi siya yung from a third-party manufacturer like before. And again, I am not a fan of car manufacturers adding third-party touchscreens, no? So I commend Mitsubishi for doing a good job with the infotainment, and it responds really well. There's both Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and it's basically a seamless infotainment. It's the same one that you would find, by the way, in the Mitsubishi Mirage G4, which you can click up here for a first look of the Mitsubishi Mirage G4 that we did before. And yeah, solid improvements as a whole for the Mitsubishi Xpander. I love the exterior, as you've seen kanina. I love the improvements despite them being tiny improvements, but they really do uplift the car's exterior aesthetics, no? Likewise with the interior, tiny improvements, but they really do a lot in terms of improving the interior vibe of the car. Really good job on Mitsubishi for that part. And then let's now move on to the other aspects of this vehicle, of the Xpander.
Also new for the Xpander is the addition of an electronic parking brake. And it's the only car in its class to have such a feature. Most of the other aspects of the Mitsubishi Xpander remain unchanged, which means you still get a very practical and spacious subcompact MPV. New for this update, however, is the addition of cup holders on the second row armrests, along with new USB-A and USB-C ports for the second row passengers. The Mitsubishi Xpander's trunk space remains unchanged, and its lie-flat third row seats is still one of the most practical in its segment. Powering the Mitsubishi Xpander is still the same 1.5-liter 4-cylinder gasoline engine, and its horsepower and torque figures remain unchanged. However, while our neighboring countries get a new CVT, the Philippine market Xpander is still using a 4-speed automatic. And there's a reason for that, which we'll explain in a few minutes.
Alright, so now we're driving the Mitsubishi Xpander, and look who's with me here.
Hey guys! For those who don't know me, I'm Nick Scalanok from C Magazine, and we are collaborating! Woo!
Yep. So if you want more collaborations like this, just let us know in the comment section. And now, what do you think of the driving experience of the Mitsubishi Xpander?
Oh yeah, because actually I drove it like a few seconds ago, and I think the best way to describe it is it's very familiar to the previous Xpander.
Right.
So like what you mentioned a while ago, there's like a height increase on both ground clearance and more tire. So I think it's 50 millimeters more height, which means that there is a considerable amount of center of gravity change being higher.
In theory, that's supposed to be what's gonna happen if you increase the height of the car,
Yeah.
right?
So with that, it's more susceptible to body roll.
Exactly.
But I think they tuned the suspension, and you can see it's tilted.
Yeah.
Like we have to really toss it aggressively to really get the body roll. But
Yep.
but if you're just driving it normally, barely feel any body roll. Very impressive.
Actually. And that's a good point to raise, actually, since normally if you raise a ride height of a car, it's gonna feel more like roly-poly, like it feels
Yeah.
like it's gonna tip over. But despite that added ride height in this facelifted Xpander, they still managed to make it feel secure.
Yeah.
It doesn't like feel cumbersome to drive.
Yeah, and we have to commend Mitsubishi Motors for that. Like Mitsubishi Motors Philippines, we have to commend them for that because it's something that can be overlooked, but they made sure that you get that cohesive experience.
Exactly. And then normally with that raised ride height, of course, you have to compensate it with firmer suspension in order to
Yeah,
avoid.
I think that's
that
how they
body roll.
did it to avoid the body roll
Yeah.
by firming up the suspension.
But it doesn't feel that different compared
No.
to the previous
Yeah,
Xpander.
not at all.
actually.
That's an interesting thing. The increase in ground clearance, it makes it more capable, but it still has that sedan-like quality.
Exactly,
in terms
exactly.
of drive. I like it. I've always liked this car.
And one thing I immediately noticed now is I sort of feel higher off the ground. I mean, like,
Okay, yeah.
it feels more towering now that I'm behind the wheel. I feel like I'm towering over other cars now compared to like the previous
More
Xpander.
SUV, right? More SUV.
Which basically, like, an appropriate upgrade, especially since a lot of people now want that tall
that
height.
you can tell that Mitsubishi Motors Philippines is really listening not only to the customers what they want on a Mitsubishi, but what they want in general.
Yeah, like it's basically adapting to that surge in demand in crossovers and SUVs.
Yeah, and it's nice that they pulled it off so well.
And that actually brings me to a bigger concern now. What's gonna happen to the Xpander Cross? Since
Yeah,
in terms of
that's
ground clearance, they're actually almost on par now.
Yeah, but unless they raise the suspension of the Xpander Cross as well. Like if they increase it to also 20 to 25 millimeters, then that becomes even more SUV.
Good point.
But that's something we do have to ask. Like
Yeah.
what are they going to do with the Xpander Cross?
They actually also did the facelift to that. It hasn't been launched locally then. But yeah, they did upgrade the Xpander Cross already. But yeah, I'm still clueless at this point on what's the
Oh,
clearance
I have a
now.
question. So you did say that in other countries, like Indonesia, they're using a CVT.
Yeah, that's one of their key upgrades overseas. The Xpander now has a CVT, but not in our case actually.
Okay, how do you feel about that?
I'm actually sort of okay with it. I mean, it's not a big deal that it doesn't have a CVT for me. It still drives, it still accelerates securely, in a brisk manner. I mean, normally if it's a 4-speed automatic, you'd normally complain that it doesn't have a lot of ratios to explore, especially if you're out on the highway. But at least on our first impressions drive right now,
It pulls well. It's very
Yeah.
it's very reactive. Like when you want power, it gives power right away.
Exactly.
As you can hear.
and it shifts smoothly. Maybe not as fast as I would expect, but for what it's worth,
Yeah.
for the purpose of the buyer
You
here.
don't need to go fast. Why go fast when you have to go secure?
And most importantly, with the 4-speed automatic, I think it's more durable compared to a CVT, especially if you're gonna load this.
Yeah,
Relief.
when
with
you have
all
that pulling power required,
Yeah.
you're really better off with the 4-speed automatic.
And basically, what's the Filipino term? Harabas. When you
pangharabas.
when you treat that car in that manner, a CVT won't be as durable.
Won't take the abuse.
Exactly, that's the point I'm looking for. The being able to take that abuse. And then as for other aspects, some refinement, steering feel, it's pretty okay. I mean, for the segment, refinement's pretty good. There's not a lot of road and engine noise and wind noise, or at least in these speeds. We haven't driven it on expressway speeds yet. But
Yeah, but if there's any indicator from the previous phase, the sound insulation should be.
yeah, exactly. The Xpander was one of those MPVs, those entry-level MPVs that actually had good refinement for the class.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure if we take this out on a longer drive, it's gonna be the same case. I'm confident on that part.
I remember driving that from here all the way to Las Casas. That's up the Bataan.
Yeah.
Very pleasurable drive. I was like with Angel Rivero and Neil pa. When we
I was
did
on that event yet. Actually.
Yeah, no, but it was newly launched. Kaya I had so much respect for the Xpander Cross because it's a really well-balanced all-purpose vehicle without giving the tropes that people didn't like noisy diesel engine.
Yeah, that's
It's a
correct.
more refined APV.
Yeah, that's correct. That's a good point to raise. And yeah, that's about pretty much it in terms of the changes here with the Xpander.
Yeah, good changes. I'm really happy with all these.
These are actually small changes, but they actually make a whole lot of difference to the driving experience. Also,
Definitely.
the aesthetics of the Xpander.
Yeah, you like the front even more now.
Yeah, I hated, or not really hate, but I wasn't actually comfortable with the underbite of the previous Xpander.
You know, it never bothered me. I'm like, oh, you drive well. I guess you're okay. But now hearing everyone talk about it, I'm like, wow, it was a bigger problem than I thought.
But now, since they revised the lower front end, they basically fixed my issue with the way the Xpander looks.
Okay, at least there's that.
3 variants of the Mitsubishi Xpander are available, and it starts at 1,030,000 pesos. What we drove today is a top trim GLS variant. And apart from these variants aforementioned features, the GLS also comes with electronic stability control and hill start assist. A reverse camera also comes standard on all variants, along with those new 17-inch alloy wheels. But the lower grades only come with halogen headlights, along with the removal of hill start assist and electronic stability control. You can see the full specs at goflatoutph.com. Though it must be noted that these specs are still subject to change. And that's because This new Mitsubishi Xpander isn't expected to go on sale until May. Though starting today, you can start heading to your nearest Mitsubishi dealer to reserve your brand new Xpander.